clerk's hands trembled as she placed the 14-page document on the polished obsidian desk. Ambassador Elias Thorne did not look at it. He was counting the ceiling tiles instead. 53. No, 54. One near the ventilation grill had a hairline cracked. Behind Thorne, the Galactic Council chamber rose in tier darks, 300 species packed into seats designed for bodies that ranged from gelatinous to insectoid to something that looked like folded stone. The air smelled of recycled oxygen and the faint metallic tang of too many biologies pressed into one space. Emergency lighting painted everything in the color of old blood. Though it was only mid-cycle, the council preferred darkness for formal sessions. Made the verdicts feel heavier. Pally X, the junior clerk who had delivered the document, stood frozen 3 steps from the desk. Her left tusk touched the edge of her datapod, a nervous habit from hatchling rituals, one her supervisors had told her to break. She could not break it now. Her fingers trembled against the smooth metal surface, leaving small prints of moisture. The document weighed nothing in her hands when she carried it. Now it felt like it might crush her from across the room. The demand had arrived at 9 o'clock, in 14 pages. Formal surrender terms. The Council's full military authority behind it. 300 species had voted. The human ambassador had been given exactly 1 hour to respond. He had spent the first 53 minutes counting ceiling tiles. A Viridian delegate made a sound like grinding glass. Several other species shifted in ways Pally X had learned to interpret as alarm. The senior clerk, a VL dairy with 3 decades of service in the face that had stopped showing emotion long ago, gestured sharply from the side alcove. Pally X could read the gesture without looking. Do something. She did not know what to do. What the ambassador did next and what those 14 pages really meant will take us 11 years into the past. Stay close. The 14 pages on that obsidian desk had been printed 11 years ago. They traveled 6 sectors to reach this chamber, and the war they demanded surrender for that war had ended before the first page left the printer. Came the shift in time, sudden as a hatch opening to vacuum. 11 years earlier, the deep sentinel monitoring platform drifted through the void between systems. Not a warship, not a colony, just a listening post with a crew of 12 and a mandate to watch. The hull was pitted from micrometeor impacts. The water recycler broke twice a week. The coffee machine had been repaired so many times that its casing was more sealant than original metal. Ambassador Thorne, not yet ambassador, just Elias. Mid-level diplomatic attaché with a bad caffeine dependency and a chipped ceramic mug that read WRLDS. Okay, YSTIDIPLOMAT in faded letters, stood in the observation deck and watched the stars drift past the reinforced glass. The deck was the only part of the platform that felt like more than a tin can with engines. 3 walls of reinforced polymer, 1 floor of graded metal, and a ceiling so low that anyone over 6 feet had to duck near the support beams. His tea had gone cold. He drank it anyway. The liquid was bitter and thin, steeped too long from a bag he'd reused 3 times. Supply runs were infrequent. You learned not to waste. The message arrived at the 3 p.m. Encrypted. Priority Alpha. The highest classification Thorne had ever seen outside training simulations. He opened it. The Galactic Council had issued its final ultimatum. Surrender all trans-sector colonies. Accept demilitarization of all human-occupied systems. Submit to external governance under council-appointed administrators. Comply within 11 standard years, or face systematic extinction. 11 years. Thorne read the message twice. Then he set down the chipped mug and walked to the comm station. His boots echoed on the graded floor. The platform's artificial gravity was set to 92% standard deckwork of the original design that no one had ever bothered to fix. It made every step feel slightly light. Slightly wrong. We're going to need more tea, he said. The comms officer, a young woman named Chen who had joined the crew 3 months ago and still flinched every time the hull creaked, stared at him. Sir, we're going to need a lot more tea, Thorne said, and coffee, and protein paste, and about 1,000 other things we don't have yet. He pulled up the platform's inventory database. 12 crew members, 6 months of supplies. No weapons beyond the standard emergency sidearms that hadn't been fired in a decade. No allies. No reinforcements. No escape plan. 11 years. Start recording, he said. Chen's fingers moved across the console. Small red light blinked on the display. This is Elias Thorne, diplomatic attaché. Deep sentinel monitoring platform, he said. The council has given us 11 years. I intend to use every single one of them. Zoe Martinez was 28 years old when she read the ultimatum. She read it in a supply depot on the outer rim of facility so remote that the nearest inhabited system was 3 weeks of travel at maximum speed. The depot consisted of 4 prefabricated buildings, 2 cargo bays, and a landing pad that had been cracked so long ago that moss had started growing in the fissures. Her job before the ultimatum had been simple: track inventory, schedule deliveries, prevent mold in the protein paste stores. The mold had been her biggest challenge. She had lost 3 batches to a particularly aggressive strain before figuring out that lower humidity was the answer. After the ultimatum, her job became something else entirely. 9 years. That was her window. 9 years to build a supply network that could move materials across 3 sectors without the council noticing. 9 years to recruit captains who would ask no questions. 9 years to secure depots that didn't officially exist. To learn which alien species could be trusted and which would sell humanity's plans to the highest bidder. She started with spreadsheets. The spreadsheets grew. They became encrypted databases. The databases became a network of runners, cargo haulers, and one very confused VL dairy freighter captain who thought he was smuggling agricultural equipment to a farming colony that didn't exist. The day she realized the network would actually work, she sat in a storage container on a dead mining station and cried for 20 minutes. The container smelled like rust and recycled air. A single bare bulb hung from the ceiling, casting harsh shadows across her face. Then she opened another spreadsheet. The work never ended. That was the point. Priya Sharma had a different job. She was a cultural attaché, which meant, before the ultimatum, she spent her days attending alien ceremonies and writing reports about who bowed to whom. She had mastered 14 species greeting protocols. She could identify political factions by the way their representatives held their drinking vessels. She had written a 300-page analysis on the significance of the VL dairy tusk gesture. After the ultimatum, her job became something else entirely. The council wasn't a monolith. 300 species, 300 governments, 300 sets of conflicting priorities. Some wanted humanity crushed the Viridian S, whose border colonies had been in dispute for decades. Some wanted humanity contain the VL dairy, who feared human expansion but preferred diplomacy to violence. A very few wanted humanity to survive, because a humanity that owed them favors was a humanity they could use. Priya spent 11 years finding those few. She attended funerals. She learned the names of ambassadors' children. She sent handwritten notes on paper, real paper, which the VL dairy treated as sacred to officials who had lost family in skirmishes. She never asked for help directly. She just made sure that when the time came, there would be people in the council who owed humanity something. Her office had a single window that faced a gas giant. She watched its storms churn for a decade. The great reed eye of the planet rotated slowly, eternally, indifferent to the small woman who sat in its view. Not Ella's, she told Thorne once, during an encrypted call that bounced through 3 relay stations to avoid detection. Not yet. But when the demand comes, when they finally put it on paper, some of them will hesitate. That's all we need. Hesitation. Thorne's face on the screen was grainy. The signal degraded by distance and encryption. But his eyes were steady. How many? Enough, Priya said. Maybe. Omar Hassan was 34 when they took him. He had been running logistics for Zoe's network, not the glamorous part, just the part that made sure ships had fuel and crews had food. He had a wife named Samir and a daughter named Layla who was 7 years old and drew spaceships on her homework. He had been careful. Always careful. He used dead drops. He rotated his comms frequencies. He never visited the same time twice in a row. But careful only takes you so far when the council's intelligence apparatus has been watching human activity for 3 years. They detained him on a trade station near the Vale Nebula. 6 council species, 12 armed guards, a transport ship with no windows. The holding cell smelled like antiseptic and fear, a combination Omar would later learn was the standard cleaning agent used by the VL dairy, mixed with the sweat of hundreds of previous detainees. Omar did not scream. He did not bargain. He did not give them names. He asked for paper. They gave him nothing. He marked days on the wall with his fingernail instead. The first week was the hardest. The second week was worse. By the third week, he had learned to measure time by the meals, 3 per day, delivered through a slot in the door. The food was bland and gray, some kind of nutrient paste that tasted like nothing. He ate it anyway. He thought about Layla. He thought about the last time he saw her, standing at the door of their apartment, waving goodbye. She had been drawing a spaceship on a piece of scrap paper. She held it up as he walked away. "For you," she said. "When you come back." He had smiled. He had promised. He marked another day on the wall. Pally X did not know any of this. She knew only what was in front of her, a human ambassador who had not read the surrender demand, a council chamber full of impatient delegations, and a senior clerk who was gesturing urgently for her to do something. She touched her left tusk again. The gesture felt involuntary now, like breathing. "The council requires your response, Ambassador," Pally X said. Her voice came out thinner than she wanted. She was 23 standard cycles old, first month in this position, and she had never spoken directly to a human before. Her species, the VL valued protocol above almost everything else. Documents were sacred. Deadlines were inviolable. Responses were mandatory. Thorn looked at her, not at the document. At her. "How long have you worked here?" "That is not the council requires. The document," Thorn said, and gestured toward the 14 pages with his chin, "is irrelevant." Behind him, the Viridian delegate made another sound like grinding glass. Several other species shifted in ways Pally X had learned to interpret as alarm. The senior clerk's gesture became more insistent, a chopping motion that meant answer now or be replaced. She had never seen a human refuse to read a formal document. In DL Dairy Protocol, document review was the most sacred of obligations. To ignore a surrender demand was either suicidal arrogance, psychological collapse, or a deliberate insult. None of those options made sense. Why would a species facing extinction provoke its executioners? Why would an ambassador with no visible escape plan waste his final hour counting ceiling tiles? Why did he look so calm? "I do not understand," Pally X said. Thorn picked up his cold tea, drank it, set the cup down with a small click. "That's all right," he said. "You will." Pally X filed her first report 8 minutes after Thorn dismissed her. Subject: Human Ambassador Is Thorn. Observation: refused to read surrender demand document. Behavior: atypical. Atypical. Consumed cold beverage. Counted ceiling tiles for 53 minutes. Requested no clarification of terms. No extension of deadline. No legal counsel. Assessment: unable to determine intent. Recommend further observation. She typed the word atypical twice before deleting the second instance. Then she added it back. Then she deleted it again. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard. She touched her left tusk. The report was not helpful. Her supervisor would read it and sigh and tell her she needed to be more analytical. But Pally X had no analysis to give. The human had done nothing. That was the problem. Nothing was the wrong response to a surrender demand. Anger was expected. Fear was expected. Negotiation was expected. Desperation was expected. Nothing was not expected. The 14 pages sat on her supervisor's desk now, exactly where Pally X had placed them after Thorn refused to take them. The document had traveled 6 sectors. It had been signed by representatives of 297 species. It represented the combined military authority of the known galaxy, and one human had not read it. Pally X pulled up Thorn's file on her datapad. His record was thin: 11 years as diplomatic attaché on a listening platform called Deep Sentinel. No direct council contact before today. No known political affiliations. No criminal record. No psychological evaluations. The file included a photograph. Thorn looked older than most humans, his age gray in the hair. Lines around the eyes. Something in the posture that suggested he had stopped caring about how he looked a long time ago. But his eyes, in the photograph, were steady. Pally X did not know what that meant. She filed the observation under in categorizats and went back to watching the feed. The observation deck on Deep Sentinel was Thorn's preferred meeting place. Not because the view was beautiful, though it was, in the way that infinite darkness punctuated by distant light could be beautiful. Because the reinforced polymer walls were thick enough that no listening device could penetrate them. Because the deck had only one door, and that door was always in sight. Because if you stood with your back to the glass, you could see everyone who entered. Ko or Vath visited on the 341st day of the preparation. The VL Airy defector arrived on a stolen cargo ship with a broken transponder and a data core containing council military schedules for the next 3 years. He was not a villain. He was not a hero. He was a mid-level logistics analyst who had watched his own species vote for genocide against a species that had never harmed them. And he had decided that was not a future he could tolerate. His ship's hull was still hot from atmospheric entry when he docked with Deep Sentinel. The platform's docking clamps groaned under the weight. The cargo ship was 3 times larger than anything the platform was designed to handle. Thorn met him in the observation deck. The tea was hot this time. Thorn had checked. Korvath's left tusk twitched as he entered. He was V. Eldari. Like Pali-X, same species, same tusks, same cultural reverence for protocol. But his eyes were different. They had seen something that broke the protocol inside him. "You're taking a risk," Thorn said. Korvath's second tusk twitched. "So are you. This data could be a trap. I could be a trap. You could. Why are you accepting it?" Thorn poured tea into a second cup, pushed it across the table. The ceramic clicked against the metal surface. "Because you came here," he said. "Because you're scared. Scared people don't lie well. They don't have the energy." Korvath stared at the tea. He had never drunk human beverages. The smell was strange herbal, slightly bitter. Nothing like the fermented fungus drinks his species preferred. He did not start now. "The council will issue a formal surrender demand within the decade," he said. "They are writing it now. 14 pages. Very precise. Very legal. Very final. When? Unknown. But you will have 1 hour to respond." Thorn nodded, drank his tea, set the cup down. "That's enough time." Korvath leaned forward. His tusks got the light. For what? To not read it. The silence stretched between them. The observation deck's life support hummed softly. Somewhere below, the platform's recyclers process the day's waste into tomorrow's water. "You cannot win a military engagement," Korvath said finally. "The council's fleet outnumbers your defensive capacity by a factor of." "I know the factor." "Then what?" Thorn gestured at the stars beyond the glass. "Look out there. What do you see?" Korvath looked. Darkness. Light. The usual. 11 years ago, we had 12 people on this platform and a mandate to watch. Today, we have supply networks across 3 sectors, cultural allies in 17 species, and a man in a detention cell who has not broken despite 6 years of isolation. Thorn's voice did not rise. It did not need to. "The council thinks this is a war. It's not. It's just 11 years of preparation for a conversation they don't know they've already lost." Korvath said nothing for a long time. Then he slid the data core across the table. "I hope you are correct," he said. "So do I." Pali-X's second report, filed 3 hours later, contained a single sentence. "Subject remains in observation deck. Has not moved. Has not eaten. Has not read the document." Her supervisor's response was equally brief. "Continue monitoring." She watched the observation feed on her data pad. Thorn stood with his back to the glass, arms crossed, eyes half closed. He looked like someone waiting for a train that had already been announced as delayed. She did not know why that image made her uneasy. She touched her left tusk. The habit was worse now. Her supervisor would notice eventually. But the gesture helped her think, and she needed to think now. 14 pages. 6 sectors. 300 species. 1 hour to respond. And the human was waiting. Waiting for what? She scrolled through Thorn's file again. The thin record. The steady eyes in the photograph. The 11 years on a listening platform that had no strategic value. No military purpose. No reason to exist except to watch. Unless it wasn't watching. Unless it was building. The thought came to her suddenly. Unbidened. And she dismissed it immediately. Impossible. 1 platform. 12 crew members. 11 years. What could they possibly have built? She filed the thought under speculative and tried to focus on her work. But her left tusk kept twitching. Zoe Martinez received the notification on the 892nd day. Phase 1 complete. Network secure. All depots operational. She read the message 3 times. Then she closed her encrypted terminal, walked to the storage container's only window, and watched a dead mining station's rusty skeleton rotate against the stars. The station had been abandoned for 40 years. Its orbit was decaying slowly, inexorably. In another century, it would burn up in the atmosphere of the gas giant below. But for now, it served its purpose, a hidden depot at the intersection of 3 trade routes. Staffed by no one, noticed by no one, holding enough supplies to fuel a fleet that didn't officially exist. 9 years. She had been 28 when this started. Now she was 37. Divorced, caffeine-dependent, and the most effective logistics operator in human history. No one would ever know. That was the deal. That had always been the deal. You build the machine. You never get credit. You die knowing the machine worked. She thought about her ex-wife. She thought about the cargo manifests. She thought about Omar-san, whose detention cell had no windows, and wondered if he could still see stars in his memory. Then she opened a new spreadsheet. Phase 2. She typed, commence. The cursor blinked. The work continued. It always continued. The final minutes of the hour rained away like water through a cracked hull. Tally X watched the chronometer on her data pad. 57 minutes. The numbers changed. 58. The council chamber had gone quiet, not the silence of patience, but the silence of predators waiting for prey to exhaust itself. 300 species held their breath in unison, and the recycled air felt heavier now, pressed down by the weight of expectation and the metallic tang of too many anxious biologies. 59 minutes. Thorn had not moved from his position against the glass. His arms remained crossed. His eyes remained half closed. He looked like a man who had fallen asleep standing up, except for the small muscle in his jaw that pulsed once every few seconds, the only sign that he was counting, that he knew exactly how much time remained, that he had been waiting for this moment for 11 years. His teacup sat empty on the obsidian desk. A brown stain ringed the interior, the last residue of a beverage that had gone cold long before he finished it. The 14 pages of the surrender demand remained untouched, their edges curling slightly under the chamber's dry atmosphere. A single fleck of dust had settled on the top page, exactly where the air circulation system had deposited it 43 minutes ago. Pally X noticed the dust because she had nothing else to notice. The human was doing nothing. She was watching nothing happen. Her left dust caked from the pressure of her data pads. He had been touching it so frequently that the skin underneath had started to chafe. The senior clerk's gestures had stopped. Even he had given up. He stood in the side alcove with his arms folded, his face a mask of professional disappointment. Pally X had seen that expression before. It meant you have failed to extract a response, and I will remember this when your performance review arrives. 59 minutes and 30 seconds. Pally X's hands were shaking. She did not know when that had started. The data pad trembled in her grip, the screen displaying Thorn's thin file, the photograph with the steady eyes. The 11 years of nothing. The impossible calm of a man who should have been begging for mercy. 59 minutes and 40 seconds. The aide adjusted the stack of data pads on the clerk's desk, aligned the edges perfectly. A small, obsessive gesture, the kind of routine motion that filled dead air when no one else to do. He did not look at the council chamber. He did not look at Thorn. He just straightened the data pads, one by one, his fingers moving with the precision of someone who had done this 10,000 times before. 59 minutes and 50 seconds. Thorn opened his eyes. You are demanding surrender from a species that has already won. His voice carried through the chamber without amplification. It did not need amplification. The acoustics had been designed for exactly this momentous single voice, standing alone, speaking truth to tiers of observers who had expected anything but truth. The sound rolled up the curved walls, reached the highest seats, settled into the auditory organs of 300 species simultaneously. Pally X's data pad slipped from her fingers. The screen cracked against the polished floor. The photograph of Thorn's eyes fragmented into a spitterbear of broken glass. She did not look down. She could not look away from the human. The 14 pages sat on the obsidian desk. The dust flecks still rested on the top page. Thorn had not touched them. He had not needed to touch them. The document was already irrelevant, had been irrelevant for 11 years, and the only thing left was for everyone in the chamber to realize it. The war ended 11 years ago, Thorn said, before your council finished drafting that document, before your fleets finished mobilizing, before you even decided what to demand from us. The Viridian delegate rose from its seat. Its body was a column of folded shit air, 7 feet tall, with mandibles that clicked when it spoke. The clicking was louder, now agitated, almost frantic. Impossible. The Viridian's translator emitted a flat mechanical voice. You have no fleet, no allies, no military capacity beyond. We have a logistics network that spans 3 sectors, Thorn said. He did not raise his voice. He did not need to. We have cultural agreements with 17 species who will not fire on us because their ambassadors owe us debts they cannot repay. We have supply depots on dead moons and abandoned stations, positioned exactly where your supply lines would need to pass. We have a man in one of your detention cells who has not broken despite 6 years of isolation, and if you think that's weakness, you have misunderstood everything about humanity. He walked toward the center of the chamber. His footsteps echoed slow, deliberate. The same unhurried pace he had used when counting ceiling tiles. The sound of his boots on the polished floor was the only noise in the room. We do not need to win a war that is already over. We needed time. 11 years. And you gave it to us. Palliac stared at him. Her left tusk rumbled against nothing. Her data pad was on the floor now. The cracked screen displaying a fragmented image of the human file. The steady eyes. The thin record. The 11 years on a listening platform that had no strategic value. No military purpose. No reason to exist except to watch. Unless it wasn't watching. Unless it was building. The thought returned, and this time she could not dismiss it. It lodged in her throat like a bone, making it hard to breathe. Horvath's data core had contained everything. Thorne had spent the 341st day of the preparations sitting in the observation deck of Deep Sentinel, across from a VEL Dairy defector who had risked everything to deliver his Tolan dataset. The tea had been hot that day. Thorne had checked twice, a small courtesy to someone who had traveled 6 weeks through contested space. You're taking a risk, Thorne had said. Horvath's left tusk had twitched. So are you. This data could be a trap. I could be a trap. You could. Why are you accepting it? Thorne had poured tea into a second cup, pushed it across the table. The ceramic had clicked against the metal surface, a small sound. Easily missed. But Horvath's hearing was excellent. Because you came here, Thorne had said. Because you're scared. Scared people don't lie well. They don't have the energy. Horvath had stared at the tea. He had never drunk human beverages. The smell was strange herbal. Slightly bitter. Nothing like the fermented fungus drinks his species preferred. He had not started then. He had not started ever. But he had left the data core. And Thorne had spent the next 3 years moving pieces on a board the council didn't know existed. Fleet movements. Supply routes. Diplomatic vulnerabilities. The names of council members who could be persuaded, threatened, or bypassed. 3 years of military schedules, enough time to plan, to prepare, to position every piece exactly where it needed to be. Zoe Martinez's supplied airpods, hidden on dead stations on empty moons, held enough fuel and ammunition to support a campaign the council never saw coming. She had been 28 when she read the ultimatum. A logistics officer on the Outer Rim, assigned to a depot so boring that her biggest challenge had been preventing mold in the protein paste tours. 9 years later, she was 37, divorced, caffeine-dependent, and the most effective logistics operator in human history. No one would ever know. That was the deal. That had always been the deal. You build the machine. You never get credit. You die knowing the machine worked. She had cried in a storage container on a dead mining station the day she realized the network would actually work. The container had smelled like rust and recycled air. A single bare bulb had hung from the ceiling, casting harsh shadows across her face. She had sat on a crate of emergency rations and wept for 20 minutes. And then she had opened another spreadsheet. The work never ended. That was the point. Priya Sharma's cultural allies would not fight for humanity, but they would hesitate. Hesitation was enough. 300 species in the council. 300 sets of conflicting priorities. 300 governments with their own agendas and their own debts. Priya had spent 11 years finding the ones who could be moved. Not allies. Not friends. Just officials who owed favors. Who had received handwritten notes on paper after the deaths of their children. Who remembered that the human attaché had attended a funeral no one else bothered to attend. When the demand comes, Priya had told Thorne, some of them will hesitate. That's all we need. Her hands trembled now when she wrote. The tremor had started in year 7. Stress-induced. Irreversible. Her signature on the handwritten notes was barely legible. But she still wrote them. Because hesitation required memory. And memory required maintenance. And maintenance required showing up every single day for 11 years. She had watched a gas giant storms churn through her office window for a decade. The great red eye of the planet rotated slowly, eternally, indifferent to the small woman who sat in its view. She had not looked away. Omer Shisen had not broken because he knew something the council did not. He knew the war was already won. 6 years in a detention cell with no windows. 3 meals per day. Delivered through a slot in the door, bland gray paste that tasted like nothing. Guards who spoke freely in front of the broken human who never screamed. A wall marked with fingernail scratches, each one representing another day survived. His daughter's name was Layla. She had been 7 when he left. She drew spaceships on her homework. She asked her mother, every night for the first 6 months, when Daddy was coming home. After a while, she stopped asking. Omar never stopped marking the wall, and he never stopped listening. The guards talked about fleet movements, about supply routes, about the council's plans for humanity. They talked because they thought he was broken, because they thought he couldn't understand their language, because they thought he was nothing. He was not nothing. He was a logistics officer. He had spent years running Zoe Martinez's network. He knew how to listen. He knew how to remember. And he knew how to send messages through sympathizers like Teo or Vath, through corrupted data streams, through channels the council had assumed were secure. 6 years. He had given them 6 years of intelligence, transmitted from a cell with no windows, marked on a wall with his fingernail. Thorn stood in the center of the council chamber and let the silence stretch. The Viridian delegate had not sat down. Several other species had risen from their seats, not in protest. X realized, but in confusion. They did not know what to do with a human who refused to be afraid. The surrender demand, Thorn said, gesturing toward the 14 pages with a small motion of his hand, is a formality, a courtesy, a piece of paper that traveled 6 sectors to tell us something we already knew. He picked up the document, held it between his fingers, did not open it. The paper was heavy, high-quality stock, watermarked with the council's seal, designed to last for centuries. 14 pages of legal precision, signed by 297 species. You wanted us to surrender. But surrender requires an enemy, and we stopped being your enemy 11 years ago. The Viridian's mandibles clicked. Then what are you? Thorn set the document down. The dust flecks scattered, disturbed by the motion, spiraling through the air before settling on the polished surface of the desk. We're the species that built victory so quietly that you didn't notice until we told you. He turned to X. Her hands were still shaking. Her data pad was still on the floor. Screen cracked, displaying fragments of his file. She had not retrieved it. She had not moved. You asked what I was waiting for. Thorn said, I was waiting for you to realize that the document doesn't matter. The deadline doesn't matter. The vote doesn't matter. None of it matters because the future was already written 11 years ago. And you weren't in it. X found her voice. It came out thin, cracked, nothing like the formal tone she had practiced for this position. That's not possible. The council has resources, military capacity. We could still. You could. Thorn agreed. He did not sound worried. But you won't. Because 17 of your member species will refuse to participate. Because your supply lines depend on routes we've already mapped and could disrupt at any time. Because the man in your detention cell, the one you thought was a prisoner, has been transmitting everything he overheard for 6 years. The Viridian's mandibles stopped clicking. The chamber went silent again. Not the silence of waiting this time. The silence of understanding. X's third report would never be filed. She knew this as she stood in the council chamber, watching the human ambassador collect his cold teacup from the obsidian desk. His fingers wrapped around the ceramic with the ease of long familiarity. The cup was chipped, a small crack near the rim, probably from being dropped years ago. He had not replaced it. The 14 pages remained where he had placed them. Unwritten, irrelevant. The dust fleck had settled on a different spot now, closer to the edge, as if the document itself was trying to escape. Her supervisor was speaking. She could not hear the words. The other delegates were speaking. The Viridian was speaking, its translator emitting a stream of mechanical syllables that might have been questions or threats or something else entirely. Everyone was speaking, and none of it mattered, because the war had ended 11 years ago and no one had told her. She touched her left tusk. The skin underneath was raw now, chafed from hours of nervous contact. The habit was all she had left of the protocol she had believed in, the sacred obligation of documents, the inviolable importance of deadlines, the certainty that the council's authority was absolute. None of it was true. She had been wrong about everything. Thorn walked toward the chamber's exit. His footsteps were unhurried. The same pace he had used when counting ceiling tiles. The same pace he had used when drinking cold tea on a listening platform 11 years ago. The same pace he had used every day for 11 years. Because rushing was a luxury for people who had time to waste, X followed him. She did not know why. Her legs moved without permission, carrying her out of the chamber and into the corridor beyond. The senior clerk gestured for her to stop a sharp chopping motion that would have terrified her an hour ago. She kept walking. Ambassador. Thorn turned. The corridor outside the chamber was empty except for the two of them. The lighting here was standard bright, clinical. Nothing like the deliberate darkness of the council session. Pally X could see the exhaustion in his face now, the gray in his hair, the lines around his eyes that the photograph had captured, but she had not understood. How? She said. How did you know? 11 years ago, when the ultimatum arrived, how did you know you could win? Thorn considered the question. His teacup was empty. He held it the way someone held a familiar object, not tightly, not loosely, just held. The ceramic was warm from his grip, though the tea inside had been cold for hours. We didn't know, he said. We just decided that losing wasn't acceptable. He started walking again, toward the observation deck where Pally X had watched him wait, where the stars rotated beyond the glass, where the 14 pages would rest untouched for last time. She followed. The observation deck on the council station was different from Deep Sentinel's. Larger, cleaner, glass that had never been scratched by micrometeor impacts, air that didn't smell like recycled desperation and old coffee. But Thorn stood in front of it the same way. Back to the glass, arms crossed, eyes half closed. Pally X stood beside him. Not close. Close enough to see the small muscle in his jaw that still pulsed. Even now, even after the victory was declared and the document was ignored and the war was over. There's something I still don't understand, she said. There are many things you don't understand. One thing in particular. Thorn waited. The document, Pally X said. 14 pages. 6 sectors. The combined authority of the known galaxy. And you didn't read it? No. Why? Thorn turned to look at her. His eyes were steady, the same steady eyes from the photograph. The same steady eyes she had watched on the feed for hours. The same steady eyes that had counted ceiling tiles while the galaxy demanded his surrender. Because reading it would have meant acknowledging that it mattered, he said. And it didn't. The war ended before their surrender demand reached our desk. Everything after that, the document, the deadline, the hour of waiting, was just theater. He gestured toward the stars beyond the glass. Look out there. What do you see? Pally X looked. The same stars she had seen every day of her life. The same darkness, the same light, but something was different now. The stars seemed farther away, or maybe she was the one who had moved. I don't know anymore, she said. Thorn nodded. That's the first honest answer I've heard from your species. He set his empty teacup on the observation deck's control panel. The ceramic made a small sound against the metal, a click, barely audible, lost in the hum of the life support systems. Beside the cup, the 14 pages of the surrender demand rested untouched. He had brought them with him, though Pally X had not seen him take them. They lay on the control panel like an afterthought, like something he had forgotten to throw away. His hand rested on top of the document, not reading, not threatening, not even really touching, just resting. Palm down, fingers extended, as if the paper beneath was nothing more than a surface to hold. Just dark. The stars did not change. They rotated slowly beyond the glass, indifferent to the species that watched them. Indifferent to the wars that ended and the wars that never began. Indifferent to the small VL'd airy clerk who stood beside a human ambassador and tried to understand how 11 years of preparation had produced this moment. Not an explosion, not a battle, not a dramatic declaration or a surrender ceremony or a treaty signing. Just a man with a cold teacup and a document he had not read. You're not going to celebrate? Pally X asked. Thorn's mouth moved in something that was almost a smile. Not quite. The expression didn't reach his eyes. His eyes were still steady, still distant, still focused on something Pally X could not see. Celebrate what? He said. Winning a war that should never have been fought? Spending 11 years watching good people lose everything they loved? No. He pulled a data pad from his pocket. The screen was small, cracked in one corner, held together by tape that had yellowed with age. He turned it toward Pally X. The photograph showed a group of 12 humans standing in front of a window. The glass behind them was scratched and dirty, marked by years of micrometeor impacts. They were smiling, all of them, even the man in the center, who looked younger than Thorn but had the same steady eyes. Deep Sentinel's original crew, Thorn said. 11 years ago, before any of this started. He pointed to a woman in the back row, Zoe Martinez, 28 years old. She built the supply network. Lost her marriage, never stopped working. His finger moved to another face. Priya Sharma, cultural attaché. Her hands shake now. She can barely write. She still sends handwritten notes every week. Another face, a man with short hair and a smile that seemed too big for his face. Omar's son, logistics, detained 6 years ago. He's still in a cell with no windows. Thorn's finger stopped moving. 3 of them are dead now. Cancer, accident, suicide. His voice did not change. The others are scattered, doing work that will never be recognized, building futures they will never see. He looked at the photograph for a long time. There's nothing to celebrate, he said again, but there's something to remember. He touched the screen. The image flickered. Omer Fishin's smile, frozen in time, captured before the cell with no windows, before his daughter stopped asking when he was coming home. Layla had drawn spaceships on her homework. She had held up a piece of scrap paper as her father walked away. For you, when you come back. He had come back. Not yet, but soon. Palix did not understand why that thought made her chest ache, but she understood that it should. Thorn turned off the data pad. The screen went dark. He slipped it back into his pocket, next to something that clicked softly, maybe the chip ceramic mug, maybe something else, something she would never know about. The war ended before their surrender demand reached our desk, he said. Palix nodded. She did not have anything to add. The stars rotated beyond the glass. The 14 pages rested on the control panel, untouched, unread, finally irrelevant. The teacups are beside them, empty, stained, chipped, carried across 11 years and 6 hectares and a war that had ended before anyone knew it had begun. Thorn walked toward the observation deck's exit. Palix watched him go. She touched her left tusk. The skin was raw. The habit was broken not because she had stopped, but because the gesture meant something different now. Not anxiety, not protocol, just memory. She would remember this. The human who counted ceiling tiles while the galaxy demanded his surrender. The war that ended before the surrender demand arrived. The victory that looked like nothing at all. She would remember.